Hello everyone, we are live. It is Thursday Live Lesson. My name is Aldrine Guerrero. I'm joined once again by the ever so magic Mike Odo. Say what's up, Mike.
How's it going, guys?
And Mr. Kahai, the legend Fergie. Let's not forget. Say what's up, Kahai.
What's up?
Gotta recognize the talent in the room, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Oh, Aaron the Voice Nakamura still not here. He is missed greatly, but you know what? We got Magic Mike here answering all your questions. So how Thursday Live Lesson works is you ask us the questions and we're going to answer them for you. We also create some, pretty interesting discussions about ukulele. Sometimes not about ukulele, sometimes about just music in general, you know? So if you guys are watching this on UU Plus, thank you so much for supporting the site. All of you Ukulele Underground subscribers out there, UU Plus subscribers out there, thank you so much for everything you've done for us. We have a lot more content coming up for you, including UU Plus private lessons, Mike. Now, have you always wanted to take a private lesson with me, Mike?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
What would you pay? Say $10, $20 for a private lesson with me?
How long are we talking here?
I don't know, 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Is that $15?
Maybe a little more. Maybe a little more than that. I mean,
$60 then.
That's a jump.
But yeah, we are going to start to do private lessons here on Ukulele Underground Plus. We'll give you the details as we get to them. But thank you so much for supporting the site. And now for those of you folks who are listening to this on the Ukulele Underground podcast, welcome to Ukulele Underground podcast. If you have not checked it out yet, please check out ukuleleunderground.com, sign up for UU Plus to take your ukulele playing to the next level. Enough with the pleasantries. Let's get down to business. Kahai, do we have a question this week?
No, I don't think we have a question prepared because we're gonna lead off from last week.
That's right. This is a part two, so to speak. So, what we're talking about last week, we're talking about we left off where we left off last week. We were saying like we have links for people that we wanted to to kind of put out there. Links that we thought were interesting or had it can either be ukulele related, it can doesn't have to be, but it's interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting links that that we find interesting that you guys might find interesting as well. We wanted to just kind of discuss those links. Okay, so let's get started. How about we start off with Kahai?
My link?
Yeah, your link. Because it was your conception. This is Kahai's idea. So hit us up with the link, buddy.
Just like stuff to show you guys. So my thing is this bass player Adam Neely, and he's also a music teacher kind of. And the video that I linked, it's in the UU Plus forum. It's him doing like a Q&A. And the last question that he got was, a lot of his stuff is more advanced music theory. So his last question that he got was like, how much is this applicable to actual playing, and why should I even know this? This seems like too much information.
Yeah.
And I liked his answer. He said like, you guys should totally go watch it, and I'm just gonna paraphrase, but he basically said like, you never know when information is gonna be useful to you. So it's always good, even if you're like, you can't really see how you're gonna use it now. You never know, like if one day you're gonna be like, oh, that is like that kind of weird music theory thing that I learned before, or oh, that is that chord that I learned. I never thought I would use it.
Right.
Like, I think like, so an example would be like for me, I know how to play diminished chords and I know about diminished chords, but I don't use them for every song. I barely use them. But there is times where it is right, like, oh yeah, that is like a perfect opportunity
to put a diminished chord in there.
Yeah, so I think and kind of relating back to last week too, of when do you know when to move on? Like, music as a journey should always just be about collecting information. I feel like you got to be a Pokemon trainer in that sense. You got to collect them all. Just get it.
There we go.
Everything.
As much Pokemon information as possible.
Yeah, so I thought that was a cool video, and his whole channel is really cool. Like just
That's
music
cool.
Theory and things you guys might like.
Well, let's take a look at that last question that that you were talking about. Like for myself, when when I was studying under Mr. McIntosh in high school, Mr. McIntosh was my band teacher. He would always excuse me. There's something in my throat. I had a we all had the same lunch.
We had a really good meatball stuff.
Meatball stuff. My throat. Anyway.
Shout out to Pomodoros.
Pomodoros.
Sponsor.
Make a great
Sponsorship,
meatball sub.
We should Somebody just said, like, they brought up, or I was watching, like, a totally unrelated thing, and they brought up the Happy Gilmore commercial.
Oh,
like,
the
he
Subway.
gets the subs into, like, people's mouths. Like, we should do the same thing for Pomodoros, right?
Pomodoros.
Like, it's like you play a chord, and then it's like,
It launches a meatball stuff in people's mouths. Oh, man. Okay, so... when I was studying with Mr. McIntosh, like he would always talk about music theory and all that stuff, and I never really understood what I would be using it for, or what it's good for. And so even though it was obvious when we looked at the music, it's like, oh, here's the key, here are the notes that you're going to be playing in that key. But for me as a clarinet player, it's like, okay, I just play those notes, but I didn't think about the scale as a whole or anything like that. I never looked at it from a music theory perspective until I started really getting like down and dirty with the ukulele, like learning, like what made the ukulele work. Right. But that was my realization. Like, oh man, I'm really using this now. Yeah. What about you?
How I got into music theory is actually pretty interesting. I was probably about 16 or so. Mm-hmm. And I was in Honolulu at Alamo Shopping Center. For those of you who live in Oahu, you might remember this if you're old enough, but this is a long time ago before Alamo turned into like the megaplex it is now. And there was a place called the House of Music. Okay. And as I was looking at one of those rotating bookshelves things, there was a little pamphlet about this big, which I still have, called The Essential Musician's Handbook.
So it's like a cheat sheet almost?
It was not a cheat sheet. It was like a little pamphlet, one of those long pamphlet-looking things.
Okay.
So I looked at it, and it just had these scales and how to make them and stuff. And even though I had always heard, like, okay, make sure to learn your scales and stuff like that, and I didn't really understand what the purpose of it was.
Why?
The closest thing I understood was that if I could play a certain scale well, then if I had to play in that key, it would be easier. So I had figured that out, but being that I played in like a high school band, for those of music theory people, I never really got past like 4 sharps or 4 flats.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, okay, so I had those.
I've learned 8 different scales.
But the others, 6 and 7 flats, 5, 6 and 7 flats, and then 7 sharps, all that.
Yeah. Who plays it?
Didn't need it, so
in an E key. Or
exactly. And so this pamphlet though had all that, how to construct every scale, and then it moved on into things like if you were going to write music, like what's the lowest note a trumpet should be able to hit? What's the highest note? How do they work together? Yeah. There's a study in theory called counterpoint. So if you're going to write a melody line, there's a bunch of rules as to how to write a counter melody line to that. Just things that you don't do because then it just sounds weird. Okay. For example, if one note is moving up, you try not to make the other note move up the same amount. So if your bottom note is going to move up 5 notes, you try not to make the note above it move up 5 notes too. Okay. Because it creates like this really weird effect.
Yeah. More like harmony.
Yeah. And it's a harmony, but it's a harmony that sounds strange to people.
I like that same guy, Adam Neely. He also did like a thing on writing music, and he said like you also don't want to just have them play the same note, even if it makes sense harmonically. Like as a whole for the band. You don't want them to just play like the E note and play the E note again, because then it's like kind of boring for the musician, and unless they do something where they add an accent or they do something else. Like it just sounds like they stay in the same place. There's no movement. So there is like there is little things like that, right? Where it does make like when you learn these theoretical things, it kind of can make your music more interesting or make it sound more developed.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. When you get right to the end of the first semester of music theory in college, you start to pick up something called 4-voice writing, which is basically like if you were going to try and write for a choir. So there's 4 parts: the bass part, the tenor part, the alto part, and the soprano part. And then there's rules about how everything moves. So if you're moving from like a C chord to an F chord, you don't just, for instance, you tend not to go just straight across like that. Because it sounds weird. Now, it's true that not every voice changes every time. But one of the things is that if the tenor voice is on an F and the bass voice is on a B flat, and they're going to move, one of them could stay on that same note,
Yeah.
but the other one can't.
Like if it was going from B flat going back to F, for example.
Right.
That,
one of them
the
could,
person who was in F could stay in F because that note goes
Right.
in both chords.
but the other person should move because otherwise then it just sounds like you're just stretching out a note forever.
I think in a previous week you mentioned too that you don't want them to like the tenor to start to go lower and then the baritone to go like higher or like
Right.
to
You,
cross paths.
yeah. If you're bass, you generally at best there's going to be times in writing maybe where you make them sing in unison, but you never want the bass and the tenor to start doing this.
No.
That's going to sound very strange.
It's Ghostbusters. It's like don't cross the streams.
Don't cross the streams, man. Bad things are going to happen. You know, and that's kind of true. And here the other thing is, you know, for any of you who are interested in this, eventually one of the most important things is learning where each instrument or voice sounds good. If you have a bass singer try and sing like super, super high,
yeah, just because they can reach that.
just because they can get there doesn't mean they're going to sound good doing it.
Yeah.
You know, just same as a tenor. A tenor's meant to be high notes. Their voice quality gives it that. So if you drop that person down to the very bottom of their register, it's going to sound more like they're wheezing than actually singing. You know. Well, how do we get there?
You're talking about your experience with music theory.
Yeah, counterpoint. So that pamphlet actually started everything for me.
Right.
More so than any of my teachers. I hadn't really started working with Mr. McIntosh, who was my teacher too. Afterwards,
Shows how long he's been teaching.
Yeah. He hit the round 40. He hit a round 40 number for high school teaching, and then he taught for another 5 years at the collegiate level.
Yeah.
So
he brought his cancer treatments to the practices. That man was legit.
Yeah. You want to talk about someone who didn't, there's like no excuses
Who
without
lived,
that.
breathed, and died in music. In music.
So since early in the thing, I know we have time. So here's the story about that. So one night we're sitting in a jazz ensemble, and I'm the bass player in that band, and all of a sudden I just hear this. And it was real quiet, so when we were playing, I didn't hear it. But he's talking to the saxophones, and I just hear it. What is that? And I start looking around, and I can't figure it out. And I hear it again. And he sees me and goes, "Michael, what are you looking for?" And I go like, "Does anybody hear that weird little mechanical noise?"
Yeah, it sounds like I don't know if the mics are gonna be able to pick it up, but it sounds like almost like shoot, what is it called? I can't think of the word now. I had it in my head, but I can't.
Give us some visuals. The thing with the
This
it looks like
oh no, this is such a terrible.
For those of you on the audio only podcast, we're really sorry at this point. But
like suicide doors, like car suicide doors, right? That's what they're called, right? Like they open up, like
the wing doors, wing doors,
like,
and they make that noise.
like Back to the Future.
Yeah,
yeah.
DeLorean.
You're talking about the hydraulics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it does have something similar because it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he's asking me what am I looking at, and I tell everybody, does anybody hear that? And a couple other people said, yeah, I heard it. I don't know what it is. Because what it was is he was sitting in a chair like this, and right next to him was another chair, and there was a bag on that chair that was his walking chemo machine.
Chemotherapy. Like during practice.
During practice. So he had this walking, but it looked like the bag he would have carried his music in. So that's why, and of course all the tubing and stuff was like under his shirt, and then so none of us noticed that. All I could hear was the machine going. I was like, what is that? And he nonchalantly, and this is how he was, he just grabbed it and was like, oh, this is my chemo machine. I carry it around with me so I can do chemo while I'm doing the band. Puts it down and then goes back to talking to the saxophones. No other explanation. He just said, this is my chemo bag, and now saxophones, back to number 27. Let's get back to work. And it was moments like that was like,
it showed his dedication.
Yeah, I mean, that's a guy
craft.
who dedicated his whole life to doing this.
Yeah.
That stuff was so secondary that it was like, there are a lot of people who would be like, oh, I got to do that. Well, I'm just going to stay home.
Because it's like, there's one point, it's like, okay, I'm supposed to have this surgery, but we have this concert coming up, so I'm going to postpone this surgery to something else. It's like, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. But, going back to to getting music theory.
Okay. We're so sorry, guys. This is what happens when we eat too many meatball sandwiches.
So I'm learning from Mr. Mac, and like as a sax player too, like he's very good at teaching jazz and teaching how to improvise and stuff. And I still it didn't click yet to me that like that's how you improvise. Like it was supposed to be in that key, and here are the chord changes in the song and stuff. Like I didn't know how to do that yet, so I was not a very good like improv sax or clarinet player. Like I could just play and like pretend like like I know what I'm doing, and sometimes it would sound good, but it wouldn't be like to the level that he was asking for. But once like here's part of my lore like ukulele, like Aldrine ukulele lore, is that I would lock myself up in my room for like 5-6 hours at a time and just like listen to these CDs and play and stuff. I would try to figure out those CDs, like Kyle Creator Boys and Pure Heart and whatnot, like all these classic ukulele Hawaiian artists. And I've noticed that like in every song, like the same chords would just always group up together. And then I would always play these notes to these chords, and then like I remember coming to school, and I'm like, man, guys, check this out. And then Keen Bot, do you remember Keen Bot?
Yeah.
My very good friend Keen, he's like, yeah, I was trying to explain these things to you for like the longest time. It's called music theory. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't think you would actually use it, like in real music. Like I didn't think in ukulele, like real ukulele music. Like I don't think you'd be using that.
I think it took me to like working here to finally get that music theory like connection. Because I think I'm more of like if I can hear it, I'll play it. More so than like looking online like for sheet music or looking for somebody to like teach it. I just listen for stuff, and then like it wasn't until I started working here where it's like, oh, music theory is like just listening to things too. Like there is that side where you listen and you play and you.
And in the end, really, all music theory is just so that when you listen to music you enjoy, you actually understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's just.
There's no other reason. Music theory grew out of wanting to have a name for this. That's all there was to it. And for those of us on the other end of it now, after all these hundreds of years of development, all it is so like if he plays something and you listen to him play and you want to know what that is, if you understand the music theory, you'll be a little bit closer to being able to pick things up because things that he's playing will sound similar. They'll sound familiar, like, oh, that sounds like this. And that's all there really is to it. Music theory can sound very complicated, but and don't get me wrong, after someone who went through it in college, it is. But here's the thing. Music isn't simple.
It's not.
And I don't mean that it can't be, because sometimes simple music is really beautiful. But the thing to remember, guys, is that music is such an expansive thing that's the reason why there's so much information in music theory. If we only had, 3 chords in rock and roll and that was the extent of music all over the world,
it'd be pretty boring.
Music theory would be a very short chapter in the book. It wouldn't have to be very long. Yeah,
but see, the thing is, like, I got pretty far with just that small chapter of music theory because a big chunk of when I was, when I was growing up and I was playing ukulele, the first few years of me playing as a professional, I only knew like majors and minors. Like I didn't know about this like flat whatever, sharp this and sus that and whatever. Like I just knew major chords, minor chords, 7 chords, and I knew what major scales, minor scales, and I knew what notes were in those scales, and I knew some I knew some technique stuff, and I could kind of get away with it, and I would fake it, for the longest time, and so I guess you could call me a fake, call a fake in one way or another, and not really faking it, because I kind of knew what it was, just I was limited to what I was doing, but I kind of made the audience think that I was bigger than I actually am. Or like, oh, I know how to do this, and this sounds really fancy. But it wasn't until I took or I read the next chapter in music theory, or like, oh, you mean I could go do this too on top of the stuff that I'm already doing, and that's kind of what what made me level up, so to speak, with the ukulele. But there's a lot, you can do with just the basic stuff. It's the stuff that we teach here.
I mean, keep in mind that if you take this ukulele on your own, you can pass ukulele 100 and 2. The thing is, with those foundational things, major and minor scales and 7, If you know those three things, number one, that is a wide amount of music that's available in Western music. Okay? So one of the reasons that just those three kinds of chords can take you very far, and for those of you at home, if you're just looking to just be a hobbyist, there's about a bazillion songs out there that if you just know your major and your minor and your 7 chords, you'll probably be able to play them. You know? One of the things to remember is that, again, music theory builds on itself. There's a lot of it, and as much as I hated this subject in high school, there's a lot of similarities to math, in which you learn a concept, and once you understand that concept, you change one thing about it, and that's the next concept.
I always thought of if music theory is like math, it's like our music theory class, like we teach everything, and then we have the circle fits for last. And that's kind of like when you learn everything, and then the teacher goes, "Oh, you can just press this button in the calculator, and it'll do the entire equation for you." And it's like, "What? Why do we learn all this other stuff?" And it's like, well, if you never have the calculator, you can still do it, right? Like, and that's the same thing.
I thought you were gonna say that, like, if and now everyone look in the back of your notebook.
There was a lot of that,
right?
You know, but then the funny part is. On a side note, as a teacher, it's funny because when I was in school, you know, they would always say that.
Yeah.
You know, like, well, what if you don't have a calculator? What if you don't have a calculator? Well, this is nowadays. It's like
2018. No one carries a calculator, and everyone carries a calculator.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, do you know anybody that does not have immediate access to a calculator of some sort? No, you don't, because those people aren't.
When I was in high school, that was one of the things in my calculus class. Like the teacher would be like, "Okay, everybody, turn off your phones, so you're not cheating."
Yeah.
And I like take out my flip phone and be like, "Do I really need to turn this off? I can't do anything with it. Like I can't. I know everybody else.
You can call your mom and ask for answers."
Mom, I need to solve for X again.
What does cosine? What is that?
Cosine? Well, I'm not trying to lease a house, Mom. But okay, so
anyway, we're. I'm telling you, it's the meatball sub.
the meatball sub. This is a meatball sub episode. Put a link to Pomodoros, please, Kira. Put a link to Pomodoros in the bottom. And then check it out.
And then Kira's like subtitle for the show will be like the meatball sub episode.
The meatball sub episode. Oh my goodness.
Why don't we just start naming the theme? After this is done, then just put the theme on it.
Kira's like gonna be like, "Come on, guys! Like I can come up with good names, and you guys are just like picking the worst."
So anyway, the end of because we went around that. Anyway, after buying that pamphlet, I started learning what was in it, and as I started to learn what was in that tablet, then I started hearing it when we played in band. That's where it started to make sense to me. Is that I would hear about this certain scale or this certain chord, and then I would hear us do it, and be like, oh. Now, and that's a big thing with music theory. If you only just read the book, you can learn everything it says, and it will still not make sense to you. Okay? Please remember that if you are going to do music theory, if you want to learn music theory, your ears, what you hear, is just as important as what you read on the paper.
Yeah.
Every single bit. Because if you don't, you will... It'll be like someone who reads a book on carpentry and has never picked up a hammer and nails.
I say swimming.
I can do this.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go out and build my house like that.
Well, in some ways, yeah, and because it's also like, if I say, can you play the note G, and then B flat? That's a minor third. Okay. If you never hear that, and you just only read G to B flat as a minor third, you still won't know it if he plays it.
That's true.
Unless you know unless you know for a fact that he played, unless he tells you, I'm going to play a G then a B flat, you won't know that was a minor third. You won't know that sound, which is so important.
For those people, obviously not me. Like, what is a minor third? Just for those people that don't know.
Okay.
Obviously not me and Kahai. Me and Kahai know everything.
Of course. Well, that's who I learned from.
A minor third is not a major third.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. See, spoilers. 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 What is a minor third, sir?
Okay, so in order to explain what a minor third is, the easiest way is to tell you what an interval is. Okay? An interval is a number they use to determine the number of spaces between two notes.
Okay.
Okay? So if I say a minor third, I'm saying that it's 3 notes. So G, A, B. Okay? Now that would when you do those the number, you only count the names of the notes. You don't worry about flat or sharp or anything like that. So G, A, B, that's 3.
So what makes it A minor? What makes it a major?
Okay. So this is where the scales come in. So a major third means that if you were playing the G major scale, the third note would be that third. So G, A, B, and then you can go on C, D, E, F sharp, G. Okay. But the third note is B. So there you go. That would be a major third. Now there's 2 ways you can think about the minor third. You can either think of it as what would the third note be in a minor scale, which of course would be B flat. Or you can think of a minor third as a major third with the top note brought down a half step or 1 fret on your ukulele. I prefer to think about it based off of the scales. You know? So if you think of a G minor scale, it's G, A, B flat.
Yeah.
And so that's where you're like the opening of one of his songs. There you go. So, and also as a tip, that's also a great way to learn your intervals, is to associate them with songs you already know. For example, the easiest one is what we call a minor second or a half step. Okay, so it's 2 notes right next to each other. So let's say G again. And the next note would be A, but to make it a minor, we make it A flat. So if you play those 2 next to each other, dun, if you're over the age of 10, you probably have heard this before. Dun, 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 dun. Exactly. Minor second's probably as easy as it ever gets because that's what it is. It's the theme from Jaws.
I was gonna say, so we don't get in trouble. It's like, that big crocodile, right?
That big crocodile. The Dino Croc versus Super Gator. They filmed that here.
It's that new movie, The Meg, right?
The Meg. Yeah, The Meg.
It's a
Family Guy crossover.
It's Sharknado without the NATO.
Yeah.
But so for those of you who have just heard this and are kind of interested, look up intervals and songs that go with it. And every interval I can think of, there's a song that has that in there somewhere.
Somewhere over the rainbow.
That's an octave.
An octave interval. See, this guy knows. That's why he's legit. That's why we get him on the show, guys. Yeah. Okay. So any last final thoughts about Kahai's link?
There was a question.
Sure.
And I think it's from John.
Okay.
John. He said, so where in my head do I file information that feels too overwhelming at the time I first encounter it?
Oh, good question.
So we need to take a peek in your head first. See where there's room.
So where do you file information? Okay, so here's the thing that I would totally tell you. If you were watching a YouTube video and you were hearing concepts that are that it's just like, I don't quite get that, write it all down. That it's going to do 2 things for you. Number one, whenever I teach even scales, even though you can go online and find every scale under the planet, and you could buy books that have millions of scales in them, I always tell my students to write them down because it invests it in your head a little bit better.
It's different.
Okay? It'll help you remember it. Look at what you've written down afterwards and then see where are those connecting threads to what you already do know and what you are comfortable with. So if you're learning in a very advanced theory concept, remember that in general, you can trace the thread back to something you already do know, something simple. Okay? So where do you file it? File it on a piece of paper, in a tablet, in a notebook.
Literally file it.
Yeah, almost literally. There are a lot of things that I wrote down in my music theory classes in college that I did not understand that. I understood it only well enough to pass it on the test. But I didn't know it well enough to put it into practical application. Some of those concepts, there was 3 years of music theory in my college, and there was stuff I learned in the first semester that I didn't really understand in terms of applying it to real life until years after I left college. It's just one of those things that I was playing this one weird modern classical piece, and then I finally saw it. There it was. It was I remember this.
Remember this concept?
I remember this particular interval and how this works. And it made it so gratifying because one thing I did do was, unlike most classes in college, I never sold any of my books back.
Kept out.
So if I took Music Theory 1, well, after I finished it, I kept that book.
It's
Music
expensive,
Theory 2,
I mean, and
they
you
are.
get so much back
They,
too.
they are. Well, yeah, because
Rip off.
I paid like $120 for one of those books, and they were going to give me like $30 back. So I'm just like, you know what? The knowledge in here is way worth more than the $30. So I just kept those books, and pretty much every music book for any music class I ever took in college, I kept. And I would go to I would go to my instructors and say, hey, are there old textbooks that we don't use anymore that you just have on a shelf?
They have a
And if
collection of some.
Yeah,
you
and
know,
if there were, and
bookcase.
if there ones, I took them.
Nice.
If they didn't want it, I took it because I figured I would figure out something. You know, there's a thing going on right now, an auction, because a music school in Northeast went out of business.
Okay.
And they're selling off most of their library in a big auction.
And you're like,
I'm so
hunting
tempted to go
What?
full
Okay.
crazy eBay on this.
What's one book that you've always wanted and has always eluded you?
Ooh.
Name
One?
one. Yeah.
I have another question, or you can answer that one too.
Nicholas Slanimsky's Thesaurus of Scales, mostly because it is super expensive.
Okay. First edition, I'm guessing.
No. It's still
The
available
only
today,
one.
but it's like $70-something for
Oh, jeez.
you know.
My question would be like, what is a music theory book that you would recommend, just for?
Okay.
That's a good one.
It kind of depends. Now, my preferred music theory book, plug, is the Jazz Theory book by Mark Levine.
Okay.
It is an enormous volume. It's about this thick, about 400-something pages, and it. Now, here's the thing about this book. It assumes you know a little bit already. It assumes you know some. Now, if you're talking about like starting from the absolute beginning,
Scratch.
like you don't know nothing. The basic music theory book from Musicians Institute is a pretty good one. I would actually say, for those of you out there, if you are interested in into theory and looking for like a book that you can just read and hold on to for a long, and that's a ton of stuff, visit your local college.
No. And then
Because almost invariably, if you live by a bigger college, they have a music program and they have a music theory class. Buy the
Just get that
textbook.
book. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times, college,
You'd be surprised. Yeah.
yeah, big college bookstores will allow you to buy the books that they sell for classes.
Courses.
You don't have to be a student over there.
Huh.
Or
Look at this guy giving life hacks.
And or like our music theory, our art course too over here does go over like a lot of basic stuff with like major, minor, and everything. But yeah, if you're somebody who maybe needs written form, I can see how that might help. Like,
Honestly, like that's why I try not to go beyond what I feel as an intermediate ukulele player. There's the word intermediate, but if you want to just jam on the uke, those are the things that that you might want to know, like major, minor,
And-
sevenths, and what makes up all those stuff. Because if you just know that. I think everything else comes with like self-exploration. Like, well, what about if I do this, or what about if I do that? Then it becomes like this chord, and you can find out about that chord later on.
Right.
But, for the most part, to play well, or to have a good understanding of the ukulele in general, like just.
well, and the other thing to remember too is that if you're going to jam with other people,
Yeah.
we've all had that experience where we sit down and they all start playing a song and you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Now here's the thing. You could fumble around on your ukulele, guitar, bass, whatever you're playing. You could fumble around on that until you find all of it. But, here's the thing. If you know what these things are supposed to sound like, if you know the difference in the sound between a major and a minor chord and a seventh chord and a diminished chord, if you know what it's supposed to sound like, you'll hear these things.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, there's a major chord, and then that's going to another major chord, then a minor chord, and so on and so on. If you understand the interval thing we talked about, then you'll understand how far up the chord went. And so on and so on. To the point where, like, for those of us who do kind of play in that more professional pool, that's why if you've ever seen someone get up to jam a song and you hear them whisper like 30 seconds to each other, and then that person can play the song. For the most part. We've all had experience, and But for the most part, they can play a song they've not necessarily ever played or even heard before.
Because it's like musical shorthand. Like you go, like somebody who's less experienced, you might have to say like, okay, it's gonna be F sharp minor to an A to an E.
Yeah.
But then somebody who's more experienced can go
6 to 5.
Yeah, that's all it is in this key, right? And then as soon as you say that, the person's like, okay, got it, I can play it.
Yeah.
So if as you get faster or get better with that stuff, it just becomes, I don't know, it's easier to communicate with other musicians.
Absolutely. And and that's part of it. You often hear people make that comparison to music's a language.
Yeah.
This is how you speak the language. It's not
so
just in the
Rosetta
note.
Stone, you'd say.
Yeah, kind of. It's like there's part of the language that is hearing all this stuff, and then there's that part of the language where you're explaining what it is. Like if you if you're with a Japanese person, and they point at a cat and say "neko," well, now you know the word for it. Maybe if you get into it, they can actually tell you why it's called that. Actually, Hawaiian's a better explanation for that because almost every name in Hawaiian is like an explanation of what it is. So at the very basic level, you'll understand the word for something, and then if you dig a little deeper, you'll understand what that word means. So that's kind of the same thing. If I hear him play a major chord, boom, I know that's a major chord. But if I dig a little deeper, I'll understand why it's a major chord as opposed to a minor chord or a diminished chord. And that just makes your exploration of music that much faster. That's one of the big things, is that if you really understand this stuff, you will be able to learn more in a shorter amount of time. You'll be able to explore all these things.
Once it clicks, once
it clicks,
there's a period where like it won't click yet, and you won't know why you're learning all these things. But then once it clicks, it's just so fascinating.
I think that period is when you're like learning it as two separate things. You're learning the playing and you're learning the theoretical side.
That's a good point.
Right.
And it doesn't exactly come together. So
because you want to just focus on just learning how to play.
And you're so excited about that that it's almost like seems like why do I have to learn this stuff, right?
Well, let me tell you a story about a practical story about this. About a year ago, more than a year ago, we started working on a music project together. And one of the things he was interested in, it was learn how to play jazz. And we were doing a lot of aspects of jazz in this project. And it was stuff you'd said, like, I'm kind of excited because I haven't really had the opportunity to explore these more hardcore jazz things. And he got to sit next to a guy who did understand that. And was able to show him, oh no, you put this note and this note and this.
This one go on top of this.
He said, and then he just
what is this triangle? Some Illuminati stuff like in my music. What's going on?
I remember Aldrine coming into work and he's like, oh, check out these chords. I want to write songs with these chords now.
And then now how he applied it later, I remember coming to your gig and a couple times they're like, dude, check this out. So you know how normally I play this song like this? Okay, so I've been throwing this in there. I've been altering that one note to change this chord to this chord. And oh man, listen to how this sounds. And it's
because the guitar player was playing he wasn't playing that chord that was written. There was something else in there, and my ear was hearing what he was playing. I'm like, what is that? What's causing that that chord to sound that way? And then I took home the music. I'm like, okay, is it that? And then when I try to figure it out, I go to the practice and I try it out. I'm like, man, that sounds so sweet against what he's doing.
Right.
So those are the things that kind of made me excited because it kind of made me take whatever I knew into a different level.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that sometimes it's learning the new concept and then learning how to apply the new concept. Those are two separate things. But the more you learn, now if we throw more jazz in front of you, you now have a better concept of what these things are. So even if the next concept we give you is another step, something else new, you have this foundation to build off of that to get there. Now it's not here to here. Now it's like here to here to get to these concepts.
Yeah, I'm still not I'm still not fluent in jazz and stuff, but I feel like I'm beginning to kind of understand hello, how are you, good morning, those kind of things,
He's not Benny Chong yet.
He's not Benny Chong. But.
Well, that was something that you're a proficient ukulele player. You're a really good ukulele player, and for you to come in and say this is something that I didn't know before, and I'm using it. It was like, whoa, that's crazy, like crazy that you can find even more things in music that you just
Get
you don't
excited
even know
about.
about, right? Or you,
Well, you know, and any I would tell you that almost any good player you'll ever meet in life has a good chunk of that attitude. Because the thing is, as soon as they stop, as soon as they think that they are the thing, they're it. The problem becomes then that they will never really get any better. They will just do exactly what they've been doing, thinking that like, I couldn't get any better than this.
But they're just being real.
Yeah, real dumb.
I think that, like if you meet like a really good player and you talk to them about styles or things that they're into, you might be surprised with what they reply with. Like they might, you know, it's like a Hawaiian musician might say like, oh, I'm really into like metal, or I'm really into jazz, or I'm really into these other genres where I can just learn other stuff and just like collect.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
well, there was a Kirk Hammett, the guitarist from Metallica. There was a period where his favorite guitarist was Makana. Slap key guitars.
Cool.
And he said that in a bunch of interviews. I've just been way into this guy named Makana. He does these things that I don't understand. I don't understand how he does it on his guitar. That's a good example of someone who does play his style at a very high level, and yet he is open-minded enough to be like, okay, so what else is there? What else is there in the world? Because the truth is, like I think we talked about this last week, you're never going to find that end.
No.
It doesn't exist.
Keep pulling that string.
That carrot's just going to stay there, buddy.
All right, so.
I think to bring it back to the question, like, so you asked, like, if he gets overwhelmed and stuff. I think it's fine to get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And to not immediately, like, use whatever you're learning, or to make it where it's like, oh, I learned it all the way through. Just don't dismiss it, right? Like, don't say, like, oh,
I like the write it down advice, too. That's really good.
Yeah, the thing is, John, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So, John, one of the things when it comes to writing it all down is not only is it going to help put it in your head better, it's going to allow you to treat it like a reference.
Yeah.
You can go back to it, and you can pull little bits from it. You know, remember, again, it's not like you have to understand whatever concept you're talking about all at once. It's not an all or nothing thing. If you understand 5% of that concept today, and you understand 6% tomorrow, you're making progress.
Yeah, it's good.
It doesn't matter how long it takes you to get to 100% of real understanding. You're just, as long as you get there in the end. And that's really the thing, man. So if you start to feel like that overwhelmed, feeling like too much information,
going to my brain.
write it down. Allow yourself the luxury of only dealing with this part of it now. And then next week, see if you can pull a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. If you take it in little bite-sized chunks like that, you'll get it, for sure. You know, and of course, here on Ukulele Underground Plus, if you have any more questions with that,
okay,
just let us know.
We gotta get to their second link.
Okay.
We're at 1:43 or 45 minutes of that one link. So, Mike, show us or tell us about the link that you gave us. Polyphonic.
Okay. Polyphonic. I am always looking for things that, because I'm pretty busy, I always love videos that have a pretty defined, concrete time limit. Like, they're not super long videos. I do love some of those ones that go on for like an hour, but I like ones that I can learn something new fast.
In 15,
20 minutes or less. So I discovered this website called Polyphonic. And basically what this guy does, he will analyze one thing. He'll figure out one thing, and then he'll make like a 10 to 15 minute video on it. And I've always found that interesting. Like, there's some that are analyses of great players. He's done one on John Bonham from Led Zeppelin's drumming, Flea from the Chili Peppers bass playing. He did one on Freddie Mercury's voice.
That's my favorite episode. The whole series. Freddie Mercury thing.
Just understand how amazing of a singer he was.
Like, vibrato, his range. Like, they broke it down.
And they broke it down to like vibrato, which is, if you don't know, it's that vibration when you hear that. And they broke it down to like how fast the waves are going, which gave Freddie his distinctive sound.
Yeah. So
but they'll also do other ones that I really enjoyed, which were like pieces of equipment that had a real effect on music. For instance, he did one on the GX1 synthesizer by Yamaha, which was this enormous $60,000 in the 70s instrument that, like 3 keyboards and 4 pads, and the thing weighed 600 pounds. But you heard it. Because everybody in the 70s who was anybody had one of these things. Now, it wasn't everywhere. So all the guys you're thinking of that would have it, I think they said they didn't even make 100 of these things because it was so expensive. 60 grand then means we're talking like a $250,000 keyboard now.
Well, let's see. Famous keyboardists or pianists. Elton John.
No, because he really stuck with the acoustic piano.
Okay.
The guy they mentioned, the two would be John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin.
Well, I was gonna say, let me guess.
Oh.
No, it's okay. Never mind. No,
Do the other one. Do the other one then.
Now you're putting me in. I was gonna just name a bunch of electric keyboardists.
I'll give you a hint. He played in the trio.
Oh. That narrows it down.
They are Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And basically they did not do like pop. They did like progressive.
Is it David Bowie?
No.
He was.
I took the easier one actually.
Go ahead.
I don't know. Like I did this.
I was just like, who plays piano? Who plays? That guy from the Fake guy.
Fake guy.
The guy had Fake guy.
Well,
George Michael.
George Michael. He plays keyboards, right? I think.
No. He plays like guitar in that one video.
Okay.
I mean, I'm probably sure he could play piano. He didn't do it as a thing.
I don't know. I'm just thinking 80s artists like that have synthesizers in their music.
my guess would be like Stevie Wonder.
That's a good one.
Actually,
That's a
yes.
good one.
Stevie Wonder was one of those guys.
Ah.
So if you the famous story about the GX1 for him was, if you know his song Pastime Paradise, which is the one Coolio sampled for Gangster's Paradise.
Okay.
The strings on there were synthesized off of the GX1. He actually fooled guys in the studio into thinking, the story is that
it was like actual strings.
one of his friends came in and said, like, wow, who'd you have do the strings on this track? And he told him the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and the guy believed him.
Wow.
So, that's an example of the GX1. The other guy I'm talking about is Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Okay.
And they have a real famous version. Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Oh.
It's a progressive rock trio from the 70s.
Okay.
They did a very famous version of Aaron Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man, and that's where all the horns and strings are in that. It's all synthesized out of the GX1. If you also are a Zeppelin fan, if you know All of My Love, and that ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, that's the GX1. The strings at the beginning of the GX1. So
interesting.
So in that one video, in about 15 minutes, he went through this history of the production, who used it, what people would be using it for now, because there are still a few people who have these things in working shape, mostly obviously at a 600-pound instrument in a corner of a studio that never leaves.
I'm also sure like that it's been turned into like a sample, or it's used as like a...
Actually, the sound generation engines from that were actually what they built off of and modified to create the DX7 in the 80s, which became the synthesizer sound of the 80s. The DX7, if any of you are old enough to remember that. Or if you like 80s music, pretty much if you hear a synth keyboard in there, it was probably a DX7.
You just modeled off of GX1.
A lot of the sound producing samples were put into the DX7. Through the 70s to the 80s, though, they figured out a way to miniaturize it, because obviously a DX7 is only like this big, and the GX1 was this and this tall, and
600 pounds.
Yeah, 600 pounds. So I felt bad for the roadies. Because they had to set it up on stage every night on a tour.
Can you imagine if like you're working at Yamaha? Is Yamaha?
Yeah, Yamaha made it.
If you're working at Yamaha and then you get an order from one, it's like, why? Come on, why? Like, we gotta pack it up, we gotta ship it. Why?
Yeah. Well, you know what they said was the biggest thing, because it was so large, because the circuit boards had to be so big at the time. The only way they could make it not fall apart on itself was to make the entire base and stuff out of steel. So that's where a lot of the weight. That's why it's so expensive, and where a lot of the weight came from. Because with the plastics,
I didn't see that episode.
Because with the plastics they had at the time, that much weight from the keyboards and everything would, on the sides, probably would have cracked
it.
Would have cracked it, if nothing else.
I'm sorry. John, that same guy who asked the question.
Yeah.
I thought he was like asking for help or something. He put ELP with a question mark, like saying, "Is that the guys who use it?" And yeah, you're right on.
You are right on, buddy.
Right on. You know your synthesizers.
Yeah. You know your progressive rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're a great band. ELP is an amazing band. You know. So yeah, you know, and the third thing he does, which is another thing I really enjoy, is he makes song analyses.
Yeah.
So he'll take a famous song and
Uptown Funk. That's my
he takes that and he breaks it down and says like, okay, where do these grooves come from? Where are the inspirations? If you get a little further in, one of my absolute favorites is "Walk on the Wild Side" by Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, because each of the verses is about somebody who was like big in the kind of like avant-garde art scene of the late 60s, early 70s in New York, and each of the verses talks about one of these people. And then there's another one about Pink Floyd's "Wish You Were Here."
I saw that, yeah.
Which is another one because it's literally about like somebody who, because of like a touch of mental illness and stuff, had left Pink Floyd just a few months earlier. And it was kind of like the band's way of saying like, you know, we really want you to get better and we wish you were here. Which I didn't really know. I didn't know that when I watched it. And 10 minutes later, I came away having a much different appreciation for a song I already loved.
Yeah.
I think, like, last week, we were kind of, like, fumbling around, right?
Yeah, we watched a bunch of them.
Well, like, last week, you played Danny's song.
Oh, yeah.
And we were like, is Danny his son? No.
It's his brother's
son.
His brother's son.
It's something like that. And we're like, I don't know. But it is cool to find out.
I'll ask him in a month.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're going to go see... what's his name?
Kenny Loggins.
Kenny Loggins, yeah, that's cool. I did a Kenny Loggins set this past Sunday.
I saw it.
Yeah, I was I did a show for Cynthia Lynn. Like she was visiting on Kauai, and I produced a show for her, and I did a 15-minute opening set, and I played my baritone, and I played a bunch of Kenny Loggins songs. I did a Hawaiian song first, which is by Blaine Singh. It's this great song called Poor Man Blues. Not Hawaiian, but it's from a Hawaiian artist. Poor Man Blues. If you guys have not heard of Blaine Singh, do yourselves a favor. Go check out Blaine Singh. It's amazing. That song in particular, Poor Man Blues, it's like the best splice of blues in Hawaiian that I've ever heard in my life. It's seriously gold. And if you haven't checked out any of his other stuff as well, go check all of them out. Go get his album. Go. Blaine Singh. He's amazing.
I think you have some videos on High Sessions, right?
Yes.
So you can check out that.
Let's see. Where was I going with that? Oh, and then I played House of Pooh Corner, and then I went to Rainbow Connection, and then after I brought up Joey to do Danny's song, and I didn't realize because I completely forgotten that Rainbow Connection was a login song, even though like when I was practicing those two songs, I was listening to that like Back to Pooh Corner album or whatever album that was, where it's like right after the other. But I thought it was like a cover. Like at first I thought it was a cover, and I'm like, oh, that's right. Loggins wrote the song.
You thought Loggins covered Kermit?
yeah, maybe. I thought it was like it was like a Muppet song.
Loggins does frog.
Written for for the Muppets, but it's like no, it's Kenny Loggins.
Loggins guy is a hack.
I know,
just riding on the back of.
He does such great songs that I didn't even realize that he did. Like Highway to the Danger Zone.
Footloose,
dude.
Nobody doesn't like Footloose.
Right, the same guy who did Pooh Corner did Footloose. It's amazing. So Polyphonic, you check it out.
Yeah,
it's an amazing YouTube channel. It's a website.
I don't know. I think it's only a YouTube channel.
Yo,
but definitely check it out. It's a good way to learn really cool stuff in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, all of these all of these things we were talking about, or like the links that we talked about before, or should be, are in the U Plus forum.
Yeah.
Under our recommendation for June 14th, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says our recommendation for whatever last week's date was.
Okay, so that leads me to my link.
Yes.
My link is a Jake Shibabukuro Nashville Sessions link of a song called Kilauea. So the reason why I'm putting this on is because this has been a meme, like throughout our Thursday Live lessons, that we always talk about Jake. We always hold Jake in high regard and stuff. And like someone asked me, not too long ago, they're like, "Is there a Jake song that you don't like?" And I'm like, "Man, this is gonna get controversial for me." Because okay, let me preface this with I do not think that I know better than Jake, nor do I think I'm better at period, like at ukulele or anything, because he's the perfect human.
I'm gonna cut out like
The ultimate
I
baby
don't
face.
think I'm just gonna cut out
Yeah.
films, and then like it's like I think I'm better.
So okay, let me just say that right now, and I think he's an amazing writer. I learned from him. I learned a lot of ukulele songwriting, like theories and techniques from Jake, especially on the ukulele and how to write for the ukulele. But if I had to, and I had to rank all the Jake songs that I've ever heard in my life, what would be at the lowest, totem pole, the lowest part of the totem pole? It would be that song, Kilauea Nashville Sessions. And Jake, I love you, buddy, and you know this. I love you. I don't think he's watching or listening or whatever, but that was
Just in case.
just in case.
For those of you about to snitch,
And I'm
make
not
sure to
saying
add
that
this
it's
part.
a terrible song. I'm just saying it's not his best. You know what I mean?
Is it a recorded song? Like, is it on an album?
It's on Nashville
Okay,
Sessions.
so let's talk about Nashville Sessions for a second. Nashville Sessions, he's obviously recording in Nashville, and I think they wrote songs while they were in the studio. Like he didn't have any songs that were already written. He wanted to create something with with his drummer and his bass player that that he had in the studio. So he wanted to write all those songs, and one of the songs is Kilauea, and it sounds like just an improv jam. And when I first heard it, I'm like, okay, here we go. Here's where it starts to sound like I'm such a Jake hater. Okay, great. When I first heard it, it sounded like someone was jamming it now. Like, like three guys, went to the whatever, the Fender booth, and they're just like kind of jamming away. And and one of the guys was like the lead jammer or whatever, and that's like what it sounded like. Knowing Jake and having studied under Jake, he's always preached about melody and melody line, and always like every single thing that he did, the emphasis was always on melody, and then like great musicality, like after that, but melody was always king. And this is the first time that I heard a Jake song that absolutely lacked in melody. And you've heard that song before.
I have.
But it's saving grace for me is I heard a technique in that video that was basically like a growl that I've never heard used on the ukulele before. So there is something that I liked, that I found that I liked in the song, and he plays this chord. A lot of dissonant notes in those chords, and he would slide it, and it would come off as kind of like a growl. Kind of like a, that kind of, sorry. But, so when I saw that, when he finally got to that part, I'm like, oh man, that's cool, he's gonna finally start jamming. And we're like 2 minutes in the song, and I'm like, when is the melody gonna kick in? When is this song gonna get started? And then it just ends. A lot of people, when I see people talking about the song, they're like, oh, I love the distortion that that he put on the ukulele. He really jammed out on it. It's like, dude, listen to like Toastmaker's Revenge from the first from Sunday Morning, the first Jake album, to like stuff that he did in Cross Current, to a bunch of like the already amazing distortion that he's done in the past. I think that that this one was just a jam. It was just a recorded jam, and there's nothing wrong with that. So
No.
I just want to say nothing wrong with that. It doesn't have to be all about melody. But for myself, since this is my link and this is my opinion, the lowest. Since someone asked what which Jake song I did not like, but I'm not saying I hated it. I'm not saying didn't like it at all. There was some parts that I liked, in that song, and it was that new growl that I've learned. Now I'm stealing that, Jake. It's still one of those things that it wasn't really a Jake track for me. It was one of those things, and it might be like a, some people say like, oh, the old Leonard Skinner was better, or the old Bruce Springsteen was better than the new, or old Blink-182 was better than the new.
Yeah,
Blink-182.
it was, one thing about that is it's like, no matter how much you love an artist, not every song they ever do is ever going to always connect with you in that way.
Yeah, except for Jake up until
up
until Kilauea.
Alan made a good point. He said, I've heard of photography teachers say that if you aren't taking bad pictures, you aren't taking enough pictures. Mm-hmm. Maybe the same is true about writing songs.
Yeah, but you don't have to put it in your album.
That was the thing, though, right? Yeah. He went into the studio with the idea that I'm gonna put this song, even if he didn't know if it's how it's gonna come out or what. So I think or a lot of that time you might not see songs that you might not like because they edited out of
and I mean even the word "not like" is too strong because I still kind of dig it. I dig the idea. That okay, here's 3 guys in a room and they're gonna be jamming it up, and this is what they came up with and stuff. The distortion was still good, even though he did distortion with the melody way better in the past. It was still good. It was still a Jake track. It's still a very virtuoso song where he did a lot of cool stuff in the tune. But as far as if we're talking traditional sense of the word song, where I'm looking for the melody, at least like a verse or chorus or some kind of thing to go back to, it didn't really have it in there. And I was listening and a minute in, I'm like, when is this gonna kick in? A minute and a half in, it still didn't kick in. 2 minutes in, still didn't kick in. It sounded like a 3-4 minute intro or something is what it sounded like, which would have been okay, if it was like an intro to something else.
I think, there's a genre of music called noisecore, and I think it could be similar to that, where it's like those musicians, and they really are. They're technically good musicians, but I think they try to find music in randomness and just by playing things which don't necessarily equate to a song, but equate to the noise or sounds.
Soundscapes.
And that's what they're trying to look for. And I think Jake was in that same song, he's more than constructing this is
the volcano erupting,
or this is it's more abstract, right? It definitely is where it's kind of an experiment in playing with sound, I think. Yeah,
and I think he does well in that area where he's trying to do something new, because coming up with the same stuff and putting out the same stuff over and over and over again is going to get tiring after a while. Yeah. So him taking a chance and taking a risk doing something like Kilauea, and I think it worked for some people, because it was for those people who haven't been listening to Jake since the first album, didn't hear too much of his good distortion work, and this is a way for him to kind of show that, hey, at one point I was known as the Jimi Hendrix, Jimi Hendrix of the ukulele. So at one point that's what he was referred to as, and it's kind of cool that he's going back to that, but at the same time, for me, lowest song total.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we said, not every song by even your favorite artist is going to be something that hits you every time. Not
everything is going to be Heartbeat. Heartbeat was my favorite. So if you're asking what is the top of the totem pole, Heartbeat. My God, what a piece of ukulele art. That is the best song ever. I wish I wrote that.
There are albums that I will listen through all the way, right? And I love every song on the album. But there is it is kind of this song.
There are those albums though where it's that one song, and you're just after that song plays, eject.
or there's even on those albums that I love all the songs. If I don't have enough time, I'll just be this isn't my favorite song, so I'm gonna skip to the next one.
To get to the
good one. In order to get to more than words, you got to put up with the rest of Extreme.
not even the album.
The Porno Graffiti album. That's what, because I was like a budding like guitar player when I was in college and stuff. I was like, you know what, I like that song more than words. I think I'm gonna learn it. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get the album. Like, oh, this it's kind of weird for like an acoustic album because I didn't know like it was by like a rock or like a metal band.
Yeah, it's like really an interesting thing because it's one of those things. But you know, funny enough, almost all those rock bands that has them like Mr. Big that had the Be With You song,
acoustic.
If you listen to the rest of the album, it's nothing but like shred rock.
That's why I was like, what am I
Addicted to that feeling,
to?
Redid 60s Mind. It's nothing. Rah!
Yeah.
And then in the middle, they have this like acoustic jam, which became the one
he want to be with you.
Yeah, that and when I knew what that band was, that's why I'm surprised that was the first single I heard because being a bass player, the bass player is Billy Sheehan. And if you don't know who
Billy Shears,
not the guy from Sgt. Pepper. No, Billy Sheehan, who made his name as the bass player for David Lee Roth in the 80s. So he was known as like this crazy shredder bass player. And so when I heard he was putting a band together, I was like, oh, it's going to be like that. And that's the first song I hear. I was like, not what I was expecting. I do like it though. I did like that song. But it just was not what I...
That was a lesson, Mr. Big. That's a good one.
All right.
Yeah, Be With You.
That, people would dig that. That's kind of a decent like 90s retro.
Yeah.
When I think about like musicians, it's like people hear John Mayer's Daughters, right?
Yeah.
Or Your Body's a Wonderland. They're like, oh, I like his stuff. I'm gonna go listen to him, and then he plays like Slow Dancing in a Burning Room or Crossroads or whatever.
And yet all those are amazing. So when he plays things like the Jimi Hendrix stuff, like Acts as Bold as Love. Like,
when he's with his like blues group, right? When he has his blues players play with him too, it's like, this isn't like the kind. Like
this is not.
There's no such thing. I want to hear no such thing.
This is not as sensitive as what it was.
Yeah. I thought this was gonna be all clarity.
He's not like the nice guy. Like, sing songs on his acoustic guitar.
Right. So one bonus link is and it's not on there. It's to check out, since we're talking about John Mayer, it's to check out that meme. Guitars replaced with slugs or whatever. Like, have you seen that, Kahai?
Isn't that? Yeah, I think
it's a meme. Yeah, like, there's a bunch of guitarists like doing these faces or whatever. But then they replace the guitar with slugs, so they're like repulsed by it. It's pretty hilarious. But yeah, so that's my link basically. It's just like it's a nice analysis of what where Jake has gone and what he's kind of doing with the ukulele now, which it's cool. I guess experimenting is cool.
Well,
sometimes you're gonna hit something good. Sometimes
Well, yeah. I mean, there's two kinds of artists. There's a type of artist that can never stand still. Eventually, they're gonna have to keep moving forward. Miles Davis was like that. And a good example in pop, Michael Jackson was like that.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson's 80s music didn't sound anything like.
Are you saying that Jake is the Michael Jackson? Michael Jackson of the ukulele.
What I'm saying is that there's a lot about we talked about that type of person who never stops learning.
Yeah, it's driving home. We got 2 minutes. Driving home with this.
Jake is like
thing.
that. Every time I've ever seen that guy, and we talked about the story last week, he has always been like looking for the next thing. What's new? Yeah. What's the next thing I can do?
Right.
The other type of artist is the type of artist that's going to give you the same album for the next 30 years, i.e. AC/DC, the Rolling Stones, guys like that. Neither one is right. They're both right for them. You know what I mean? So, if sensitive John Mayer is your thing, and that's the type of music you want to learn, stick with it, man. Stick with it. Go with it.
Melody line, Jake Shimabukuro is what you like.
Then stick with that.
That's good. But if you like experimental, just improvise in the studio, Jake, that's good too.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong. Your personal musical taste, or your taste in anything really, is yours.
Yeah.
Own it. Don't let somebody tell you like you shouldn't listen to that because that's fake, bro.
But we wanted to do that. Yeah, we wanted to do that link because like we said, we give him lots of high praise here on Thursday Live Lesson, and some people are like, man, you say anything bad about Jake? It's like this is not a bad thing, but it's not everything's good. Not everything's good. So we figured it was nice to kind of balance the force, right? It's light and dark side of the force.
To let you know that it's that thing, that relationship of your love for
Yeah.
an artist's music. They're not going to do everything. Not everything they do is always going to be something you love, but you still respect them for
Yes.
doing it.
Yes, yes.
You know what I mean?
Or even that, I was gonna say, I think the only way you can like in every single song an artist puts out is if you're the artist who's making the songs, right? But even that, like I feel like artists will be like, I don't like the song that I made. This is a bad song. Or
Oh, there's so
self-critical.
many of those. Our good friend Daniel Cummings wrote a song that all of us love, and he doesn't never want to play it ever again.
But that's for another day.
It's you, Daniel.
It is, we have gone way over, but thank you guys so much for tuning in to Thursday Live Lesson. We've loved having you, Mike. We're going to have Mike again. No, we're going to have Mike again. He's going to come back again very soon, actually. So, Aaron, whenever Aaron goes off on another trip, or whenever it's like the first week of the month,
whenever Aaron decides to run 50 miles again.
Mike is going to be there. He's going to be answering any and all of your questions. Thank you guys so much. For those of you folks who are listening on the podcast, thank you for downloading. For those of you folks who have signed up for UU Plus and watching this live, thank you so much. You can always watch us in the archives. And as usual, stick around for one-on-one coaching, and also stick around for Songs Made Easy. This is Aldrine Guerrero, Mike Odo, Kahai Fergan. Aloha.